When I moved on to the so-called real world, the civilized world.
Hello, welcome to TYT Community. I'm the Young Turks Community Ambassador. My name is Kimani David. With me today, I have Jeff Waldorf, Rhiannon Avaneen, and Kevin Wayne.
I'm Jeff. I'm an author. I write a blog. It's another progressive blog, .blogspot.com. You can follow me on the Twitter at Talon04.
You can call me Lady Rhiannon. I am an artist and a writer, and you can find me on Twitter at Lady Rhiannon824.
Hi, I'm Kevin Wayne from Florida. I am a TYT community member, and I write for Verity Nation.
Planting the Chinese flag on a disputed island in the East China Sea. Japanese helicopters hover as this turf dispute gets ugly. Protests in Japan, Hong Kong, and Beijing as a nationalist spirit grips.
Hard facts prove that Japan is a monster, a devil. We must eliminate the beast in order to protect the Chinese nation.
Anger, discontent after Japan detains 5 members of an activist group from China, Hong Kong, and Macau. Sailing from Hong Kong harbor, tracking their movements on Facebook, they land on an island chain claimed by both China and Japan. The island sits in a sensitive spot, lodged in between Japan, China, and Taiwan.
From the Beijing's perspective, I think there will be a major change of leadership coming up at the 18th Party Congress. So at this stage, the government also doesn't want to appear as weak, particularly given the rise of Chinese nationalism.
Control over Asia's seaways has become one of the most contentious geopolitical issues this year. As China's economy rises, so too does its political voice. The world's #2 economy claims sovereignty over virtually the entire South China Sea, naval boats patrolling the region. These South Korean athletes swim to an island at the center of a territorial dispute between Seoul and Tokyo. Further south, the Philippines stands behind its own sovereignty claims. Diplomatic spats like this could jeopardize a huge Asia trade flow. China is the largest trading partner of both Japan and Korea. Japan had invested about $80 billion in China up to the end of last year. South Korea, $50 billion.
Already in China, there are very emotional netizens calling for a boycott of Japanese products. I think both governments at this stage are very anxious to prevent the trade war. I think they realize very well that trade is perhaps the only positive factor in bilateral relations.
And across the region, old grudges linger. Japanese ministers commemorate 67 years since the end of World War II. Koreans demand an apology for women forced into sexual slavery by Japan during that conflict. More signs the forces of history still exert a powerful pull in the new epicenter of global economic growth.
It's kind of dangerous happenings there, isn't it? How the news on that, Kimani, really goes all over the place with a lot of different subjects, all seeming which are diversions from the island, and the island almost seems like a diversion. I mean, are we talking about a land dispute, or are we talking about a lot of countries that are mad at each other for international trade reasons and for old sores and wounds?
They're mad at each other for other reasons. They already hate each other, and they're just using this as an excuse to fuel the fire, so to speak. But one of the first things that I noticed was that one of the Chinese protesters was saying things about Japanese being demons and being evil. And this just is the same thing that keeps happening over and over again in these types of protests, is the people, the citizens, get riled up. And they don't just see it as a political dispute or a land dispute. They have to turn it into those people are the monsters.
I think it's just a continuation of an old rivalry. I mean, they were enemies during World War II. A lot, the Japanese did a lot of terrible things to China. China's still pissed, and China's going to use whatever kind of pull and to piss off Japan, and Japan will do the same thing. These islands are a diversion. It's nothing but rocks and goats. So it's not the islands themselves.
I agree with all of you guys in that the islands are acting as a proxy for war. It's not about who owns the islands or fishing rights. I mean, there is an oil interest there because presumably there's oil off the coast of South China, and the islands could feasibly be a great location to harvest that oil. I want to bring in a couple facts to the discussion. 18 months ago, Japan had a huge earthquake, and their economy is still suffering very, very much from said earthquake. The governor of the Tokyo region, Shintaro Ishihara, used $26 million of public funds to purchase the islands from a private Japanese owner. Now, if China does decide to engage in physical conflict with Japan over the territorial rights of these islands, I mean, that would be the claim, obviously, is the proxy for war. The Pentagon has actually stated that the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty would come into effect in the event of a military conflict with China. So that spells out a lot of negative things for us as U.S. citizens. Now, there are protesters at the Japanese embassy. They're protesting Japanese business in Japan. The author of the article that we read earlier, William Pesic of Bloomberg News, says, "It is easy to envision Japanese businessmen being dragged from their offices in Shanghai and beaten or killed by an angry mob." And if something like that were to happen as a result of these protests, things would escalate very, very quickly.
Diaoyu Senkaku sped flares up again. China has begun to turn up the heat in its territorial war of words with Japan over the Diaoyu or Senkaku Islands. The latest hostilities began when Chinese patriots landed briefly on one of the islands. Before being arrested by Japanese Coast Guards. Japanese activists retaliated, much to the charging of the Chinese government. Chinese people then responded with a series of spontaneous protests. The tit-for-tat protests are just one of many territorial disputes China is involved in with its neighbors. Territory and patriotism aside, the real source of the disputes is oil. Why can't everyone just settle things amicably?
It's worth it to bring up the seemingly unimportant conflict between Japan and China over these islands, because once the argument is provided, you're going to see, like Reese just said, the domino effect happen. You have a lot of uneasy tensions that are just one twinge away from snapping, and I mean, and this all directly affects the U.S. because we have economic interests in literally every place that has these tensions going on.